everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Royal Astronomical Society RAS200 premieres. And today it's really exciting that I am joined from all the way from South Africa by Dr. Daniel Kahnemer. Okay, I wanted to start by saying hello, of course, and wondering if you can start off by telling us about yourself and your role at the SAAO.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Thanks for chatting to me. As you said, I'm at the SAO, the South African Astronomical Observatory. Our head office is here in Cape Town, South Africa, with our observatory based about 4 hours north in the Sutherland and the Northern Cape. So that's our observing site where all the telescopes are. My role at the observatory is officially the science engagement astronomer. So I'm an astronomer by trade, but I am tasked with doing science engagement. So I do all of the exhibitions, interviews, the press, media, and then also things like our annual reports. We're building a small visitor center. We're doing this exhibition, and all sort of science engagement roles on the observatory, accessing our target audiences, schools, public, and everyone else.
And how did you become tasked with those roles? Was that something you looked for or ever thought you'd do when you were younger?
No, it kind of found me. I was doing a postdoc at the observatory, and the outreach astronomer at the time left, and we basically had nobody to field the calls from the public asking what it was they saw in the sky, or those sorts of questions that we get quite regularly. And I was asked if I would do it, so I did. I said that'll be fine, and it kind of just went from there. It just grew and grew. We can talk about it a little bit later, but this was a few years ago now, and we were beginning to plan for the 200-year anniversary of the SAO, which is also this year. And since I had fallen into that role, it was kind of natural that I took a lead on some of those aspects too.
Brilliant. And so how did you get involved with RAS200?
So fortunately for me, this was already underway when I came into the role. There had been an application to do this astronomical data exhibit already submitted and accepted. And then it was tasked on me to actually implement the exhibition and the project. So the observatory itself has a long relationship with the Royal Astronomical Society. We were the Royal Observatory at the Cape of Good Hope for many years, until I think 1972. The British government had a very large role and was actually funding a large part of our observatory until then. So through that and through the Royal Astronomical Society and some of the scientists who were coming from the UK at the time, we've had a long history. And I think that was probably the main motivation to get involved with this. And then, so we kind of took it from there, put in that application, and now we're working together and trying to sort of share this astronomical data exhibit.
Yeah, it's fantastic for us as well, because like you said, there is a long-standing relationship between the two sites, and it's nice to be sort of formally linked like that in both of our bicentenary years. So it's out of the 12 projects we've only got 2 international ones, and you're one of them, and definitely the furthest away. Unfortunately, I never got to come and visit you, but you never know in the next few years. So can you tell us about the project itself, the RAS200 project itself, and what sort of things does it involve?
Yeah, so the project has turned into basically an exhibition. The plan was to walk through the past 200 years of astronomical data. So astronomical data obviously being everything we observe, and in every possible way. So starting from 200 years ago, when the stars were observed and notes were essentially made in little notebooks with pen and paper, and then the sort of revolution into photography that happened in the late 1800s, and how that affected astronomy. The first surveys, the first survey from the Southern Hemisphere was performed at the SAO, the first photographic survey. And so, you know, we are trying to take people through that history, talk about how astronomers first interacted with what is broadly known as data, but is actually the stars. So, you know, how did we record the interesting aspects of the stars and actually interrogate them? And then, you know, so moving into the photographic era where we have photographic plates, we have a large library of photographic plates from that time, and just sort of introducing those to people and how those looked and how they operated, and the richness of data that a photographic plate can hold. And then into sort of more modern times when we are doing the digital era of photography and CCDs, and how we can capture more and more information from the stars and galaxies and things that we're observing, and again how we interrogate that and try and tell a story of what's happening in the night sky, and then ending with the sort of current era of big data, which is something that at the observatory we obviously are dealing with a large amount of data, not as much as some observatories, but we are linked to the LSST project or the Vera Rubin Observatory, and that will be generating a huge number of transients, and we have a very large transient follow-up program. So, you know, we would just like to sort of walk people through kind of a history of the observatory, but through the eyes of astronomical data, and then introduce them to the future, sort of what is happening now. You know, there's a lot of exciting things happening at our observatory and around the world, and this sort of big data era with a lot of collaborations and more data than we know what to do with, and how we interrogate that and visualize it. So we'll have aspects of quite modern big data visualizations, you know, fly-throughs and 3D models of data which people can kind of interact with and explore.
Sounds fascinating. Like I said, I wish I could come and visit. Can you give us a bit of an insight into the heritage, the astronomical heritage of South Africa as a whole?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can definitely come and visit as soon as this is over. You'd be welcome anytime. Yeah, so South Africa as a whole has actually got quite a rich heritage. There were various observatories over the years. The Royal Observatory in Cape Town was the first one, established in 1820. And then there were various other observatories which were posted up the East Coast and then in Pretoria. And they all kind of merged into one in the 70s, into one observatory for the Union of South Africa. So that was the sort of primary driver for astronomy for many, many years. And since then, there have been other sort of observatories which have set up. The Hartbeespoort Radio Observatory, also just outside Pretoria, was a NASA communications station, and they basically donated the telescope, the radio telescope. It's a 26-meter radio telescope, to the South African Observatory to set up a radio observatory, and that was kind of where our radio astronomy started. And then in recent years, in the past 20 or 30 years, in post-democracy South Africa, there's been a massive investment in astronomy in South Africa. It was identified as one of the key drivers for development in South Africa, and there have been various projects which have been funded, and a lot of government backing for this, to try and make astronomy one of the things that we're focusing on. And the support for that has been immense. So the initial support was for SALT, the Southern African Large Telescope, which is still one of the largest telescopes in the world and the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, which is based here in Sutherland, our SAO telescope. And that was a massive project and a flagship for South Africa at the time. It still is, and it showed a sort of huge willingness of the government to support this kind of endeavor, and I think that reached a global audience and allowed people to really see South Africa as as a global astronomy contributor. And then since then, as most people will know, it's just grown from strength to strength. We set up this astronomical geographic advantage area, where it's a very large area of the Northern Cape. A large portion of the country is dedicated to astronomical, sort of astronomical events and activities. So you aren't allowed to set up large TV beacons or radio stations or anything like that, because it affects the observing capacity of the radio telescopes, and the same applies for the dark skies. So we really are trying to maintain that geographic advantage we have, as one of the best sites in the Southern Hemisphere for doing astronomy. And then, from that came the Square Kilometre Array, and South Africa invested a huge amount of money into developing the Pathfinders, the Karoo Array telescope, and then the Meerkat telescope, which is now a precursor to SKA and will be incorporated into the larger SKA project. And winning a large part of the SKA bid was really the culmination of many years of government support and South African astronomers really banding together to put South Africa on the global astronomy map. So I think, from relatively humble beginnings 200 years ago, South Africa really has come a very, very long way in astronomy. And now, I think that there's no doubt that we are a global contributor.
It sounds like it was a really positive move by the government to sort of focus on astronomy, and it's nice to have that backing. And then you've got that partnership in terms of sort of looking after the dark skies and the radio astronomy and things like that, because sometimes I imagine that collaboration isn't there, and then you're sort of fighting over building buildings and all of that kind of stuff that governments are also involved in, that goes against the astronomy. And it sounds like a really nice partnership, and really positive for the next generation as well, to see that you value astronomy and therefore STEM subjects and all of that kind of thing as well. So that's really nice.
I think that I think that we really were very fortunate. We had very far-sighted ministers and government officials who saw this as a way for South Africa to really push these STEM subjects and push science and technology for South Africa, and really push our country into the forefront of these sorts of advancements, rather than try and play catch up with industry and other things which were going on around the world, to try and as the act suggests, is like make the most of our geographical advantage. Like that area is really primarily suited for astronomy, and it's something we can really invest in. And I think that the evidence of that and the effect of that has been quite clear to see. There have been a lot of PhD graduates, and at other levels there's a lot of technical development. We've really built a very strong scientific and technical backing. And I think that Meerkat was the culmination of that. Basically Meerkat was built on time, on budget, and better than spec, and it was all done locally. It was all done in South Africa. We've really shown that from a technological point of view we can do it, and I think that was wonderful for our whole country to sort of prove to ourselves that we're not playing catch up with the rest of the world. We can actually lead. So
yeah, definitely, and prove to the rest of the world as well that you can do things on time, in budget, and all of that stuff that doesn't always happen in the space industry.
No, especially not in astronomy.
Yeah. So with the exhibition, you've sort of spoken about this a little bit already, but what sort of things will be in the exhibition, and who's it for? Who's it aimed at?
So initially, unfortunately, things have had to change, and COVID has had a role in that. Initially, the plan was for this exhibit to be exhibited for 6 weeks at the South African Museum in Cape Town, and that would have been for the general public, and then also for the the hundreds and hundreds of school children, or thousands of school children that come through there daily. But obviously with COVID, the museum has shut its doors and it's not clear when it's going to be open again, and especially not for large crowds. So the decision was made with the museum to postpone the installation of this exhibit at the museum and rather focus on the new visitor center that we're building here in Cape Town. So we're building a small visitor center on the Cape Town site. We have a visitor center up in Sutherland already, which sees about 30,000 visitors per year. And we are now trying to promote the observatory in Cape Town, particularly in light of the 200-year anniversary. So we will be hosting the exhibit at our new visitor center, which will be open later in the year. And again, we will be directing the exhibit at both the general public as well as learners and educators. So we have many school groups coming through here in Cape Town. We give them a tour of the site to talk. We do some activities with them, some workshops, and now the exhibition and other parts of the visitor center will form a part of that offering. And then obviously we will also have the exhibition open to the public to come and explore and visit.
Brilliant.
As for what's going to be part of it, so as I mentioned, we're trying to show various different types of astronomical data. So we will have some of the original notebooks from our archive showing these sorts of data, and the current theme is that we're looking at comets through the ages. So we'll look at sketches of comets, and then the first glass plates of comets. The Great Comet of 1882 was photographed from Cape Town by Sir David Gill, and that kind of set off his photographic survey of the southern sky, because he saw all these stars in the background, and he's like, wait a minute, we can we can count those and measure their brightnesses, and I don't have to stay up all night doing it. So we will put those glass plates on display, the notebooks on display, and then we really want to have a large interactive element. So we have an HD wall, which has various HD screens and an interactive leap motion device, so that people can sort of walk through the history and just using hand gestures kind of explore the history of astronomical data. And in that we can kind of have information getting across. We can have little quizzes and things that can engage the audience, as well as really nice media. So we're planning to have a model of the comet, which you can spin around with your hands and try and explore the data sort of as an individual. And then some other interactive aspects, like a question and answer area where you can sort of get the questions read out to you. And so we have to try and hit a couple of different targets. We want it to be interesting for learners and educators, but then also to the general public. So and I think that making it as interactive as possible is a great way to do that. We really want people to engage with it, not just to have posters on the wall.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really interesting way of showing all the different types of data, historical, current, big data, in lots and lots of different ways as well. And really celebrating, like you said, the glass plates and the drawings, because sort of I know and or understand why data is so important, but getting that across to the general public and to different audiences, because sometimes I hear the word data and I think I kind of switch off a bit. But can you kind of explain to us why data is so important in astronomy?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like you hear the word data and you switch off. You think it's boring. You think it's just numbers on a page or on a computer. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to explore with this exhibit, is the fact that data is it's something, right? Like it's some knowledge. A picture is data, and I don't think a lot of people recognize that. And we even have some etchings on rock art etchings and paintings on walls here in South Africa, of the comets and meteors, and that's data. Somebody has seen something in the sky and they've recorded it with clay and rock. And that's capturing data to share with someone else. You can interrogate it, and then a sketch is the same, and that sketch has nuance to it. Like, the data is not clean. It's got somebody's style in terms of how they drew in there, and you can kind of talk about data with these very simple models or simple examples of how one captured the data of something happening in the sky. You saw a comet and you sketched it.
Yeah.
There's lighter areas, there's darker areas, and then you can see how you can do better with a photograph. And then I think in that way you can introduce people to the concept of data in a way that it's not so scary. You can kind of see how we interrogate data, and when we talk about data, all we're talking about is information which we are gathering about the source, and we just have so much more information than the human eye can comprehend, and sometimes even the human brain can comprehend. But like, I think the lesson is the same. So I think that it's a great way of trying to introduce people. I think that the timeline makes sense, from your sort of learning perspective, to see how it progressed astronomically, and then with your own sort of understanding can progress along the same lines.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said about sort of human beings have made those clay etchings or the sketches. There's real people behind those. So it's not just kind of like computer data that we sort of think about when we hear that word. There's real stories behind that, and real astronomers from 200 years ago and stuff, which is really cool, and obviously a lot longer.
Yeah.
So part of your work as well, I think, was supposed to include an astronomy festival in October, but you were saying things have changed slightly with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of things have had to change with the sort of current pandemic. We had various events planned for October. The observatory itself has been declared a national heritage site in South Africa, so that's a very high honor. It's sort of the local equivalent to a World Heritage Site. So we're not quite where Jodrell Bank is yet, but we're going to try. That's one big event which we were planning to have, and we will still have in October, and that was kind of bringing everything together, the unveiling of the site as a national heritage site, and that is necessarily going to be virtual now. So we will have we'll have a film crew on site, but all the talks and people will be joining virtually. And then in line with that, we are having an astronomy symposium, which of course you're welcome to attend. It will also fully be virtual now, and that's just sort of talking through the sort of partially the history, but a lot of focus on the current sort of state of astronomy in South Africa, socially, culturally, and then in terms of the science and the future, where we're heading. And then, as you mentioned, we were going to have a large public component with an astronomy festival, with stargazing and competitions and music and large crowds, workshops, lectures, and but obviously that's the last thing we can really manage right now, is having large crowds on any in any small space. So that has been postponed largely to October 2021. And as much as possible in terms of the lectures, workshops, we will be taking them online. So we'll be having an online festival, which will run in the same week in October. And it'll entail workshops for learners and educators and the general public, public talks, and then obviously some interactive elements. But for the most part, it has been postponed, and we won't be attempting to have anything in person in October, unfortunately.
Yeah. So it's been quite interesting with the pandemic, because obviously it's been absolutely awful. But one of the positives to come out of it is having urged people to take things online. and it means that we can sort of collaborate way more internationally than we ever did. I mean, from the RAS's point of view, we have international fellows that we often don't interact with just because we base so much of our stuff in the UK. But now doing things online, it means we can, join in with these festivals and with time differences and things. But it has kind of opened up the world in terms of astronomy and collaboration as well. So there are a few very small positives from this awful situation this year.
I think that, like, for the symposium, for example, it's now, it's open to anyone, not just to people who can get there.
Yeah.
I think that'll probably stay. I think that's probably something which is going to continue for some time, that, we'll be able to attend all sorts of exciting things remotely from now on.
Definitely. So we sort of talked a little bit about diversity, and that's part of my role here at the RAS. So why do you think diversity is important in the work that we do? And are there any issues surrounding diversity in astronomy in South Africa?
Well, South Africa is a very diverse nation, as I'm sure you know. We have many different cultures. We've got 11 official languages, and trying to do the work we do in terms of outreach and trying to get people engaged is tricky. It's hugely area dependent in terms of the language that you're communicating in. In a large number of cases, if you're communicating in English or Afrikaans, then that is the person's second or even third language, which means that it is very tricky to try and get the message across, or whatever you're trying to communicate, if you're doing it in a language which someone perhaps isn't sort of comfortable with, or entirely comfortable with. So, I mean, language is definitely one issue, and there are ways around that. We obviously have our exhibitions in different languages, and we're actually in our new visitor center. It's quite exciting, so I'll tell you about it. We're installing an exhibit which is on the star lore of the First Nations. So those are the Khoi and the San peoples of South Africa, and that will be in 4 different languages. One being the Kokokoa, which is an original San language, and is spoken by only 200,000 people.
Wow.
And then isiXhosa, Zulu, and isiXhosa, English, and Afrikaans, who are the most common languages. So, we'll be presenting. We'll have animations, and we'll have other aspects of the exhibition, but all of them will be presented in 4 different languages, which is quite cool. And we'll try and do that with as much as possible of our offerings. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, related to that is actually the diversity of culture. Yeah. So, people have a different understanding of the stars and the night sky, what it means to them, and a different way of engaging. So, not everyone can engage with astronomy through the sort of Western educated manner. So it's important for us to try and reach our target audiences in a way that it makes sense to them. So through their understanding of the stars, their sort of cultural significance, and incorporate that into our messages, so that we can really reach people from where they're coming from, rather than have to pull them all the way over to our side. And I think that that exhibition that I mentioned, the Star Law, is a great way to do that. It's an attempt to be inclusive and to get people sort of interested in a deeper way, in a more human way with astronomy, rather than just with the data. Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you know any of the sort of Star Law stories from these ancient traditions?
Some of them. I know that there's so the one which is often shared is there's a San legend of a girl guarding the hunters home at night. So the hunters are out hunting in the night, and she takes some ashes from the campfire and throws them up into the sky, and that creates the Milky Way and guides them home. And then, I mean, there's various other ones. There's one about a hedgehog who sort of comes down to Earth to eat little ants, and that's the shooting star sort of coming down. So so yeah, we're making some animations of some of these stories, and trying to keep them quite, engaging and fun, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't necessarily have to get a message across, or it's more just about getting people interested and relating to these ideas, and
yeah, because there's so many stories, and like you said, it's not just about the Western ideas of constellations and all of that kind of thing. There's so many across the globe, even sort of what people see in the face of the moon. Do you see a man? Do you see a woman? Do you see a rabbit? And it's so different across the globe that it's really interesting to hear all the different sides of things. We are all under the same sky at the end of the day, aren't we? So
we are, and we see it quite differently. So I mean, the other thing we're doing in the visitor center is we will have one of the roofs with Koi and San constellations instead of the Western constellations. And then a little brief write-up in 4 languages of each constellation and what it means. So instead of Orion's belt, they have 3 little tortoises. So
that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's quite cool. Like, I think it's cooler than Orion's belt, actually. I think I'll use that from now on.
People won't know what you're talking about, but you can educate them.
Can you see the 3 tortoises?
I do like that. I definitely will keep an eye out for that. It's raining here.
I thought it was summer.
Well, exactly. Yes. We moan whether it's too hot or too cold or too rainy or too wet. So it will rain no matter what. So obviously it's the RAS is bicentenary, but it's also a special year for you guys. And what sort of things have you been, apart from this, obviously, what sort of things have you planned for 2020, and well, what else have you postponed as well?
Yeah, so I mentioned the unveiling of the National Heritage Site, and I think that's our big thing, as well as the symposium, which is also happening it's sort of 200 years to the day on the 20th of October this year. So that was our target date, and the unveiling will hopefully have a ministerial attendance, and it'll be a very high level event. Obviously all virtual now. And then the symposium to try and sort of bring together the astronomers of South Africa and Africa, actually, because a lot of our work these days is actually to try and grow astronomy, not just in the country, but in the continent. And we have various collaborations with other universities around the continent to try and raise African astronomy. And I think with the SKA and the SKA base stations, which are planned to go out throughout the continent too, it's the time is right to try and set up those collaborations and involve some of the local parties. So yeah, the symposium is really a chance to try and bring all that together. And then the festival, as I mentioned before, was one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. But we'll try and do as much as we can online, and we'll have an online presence and try and sort of share as much of the history and then also the sort of the current staff and the students and the achievements of astronomy in South Africa.
Yeah, definitely. I know we managed to have a party in January before things went crazy. So hopefully you guys will get some form of celebration as well. By October, you might be allowed 30 people in a room or something like that.
October's pretty close. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, actually, that's true. Not far off, is it?
Yeah.
It's like we've been stuck in 2020 for such a long time. It's a strange passing of time now, but there we go. Great. I think that's all the questions that I had to ask you. I wasn't sure if you had anything else that you wanted to mention or tell us about or say or anything like that.
No, I think that's great. And I think that, as I said, like we will try and make as much of this available online. And I think probably try and make elements of the astronomical data exhibit online too, if possible. And we can try and share that as far and wide as we can. And when travel is possible, then you're welcome to come visit and
brilliant
sit in person. And we have sun, so lots of sun.
There you go. I'm definitely. No, I would love to. As intrigued about the big data exhibitions, like the way that you're showing the big data as the etchings and the glass plates and all of that, because I love the history of astronomy as well. So very, very interested for sure. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I'm really excited about the exhibition and about this international collaboration that we have. And I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And what we're going to do now is switch to the video. So thank you again to Daniel and the team at the SAAO. And hope the audience now enjoy the video. So thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. So the observatory was originally set up by the Royal Navy to as a timekeeping base. So we would look at the stars, keep accurate time, and then pass that message on to the ships when they were in harbour. So the ships would come into harbour and refuel with food, water, supplies, and as well as be able to reset their clock. So it was very important for the ships to be able to have an accurate time on board so that they could tell their longitude. Latitude you can tell very easily with the stars, but longitude you require some reference time. The Royal Astronomer would be based here, and he would spend his nights mapping the stars, working out the accurate time, and then that information would be passed on to the ships in various ways. In 2020, the Cape Town Observatory will be celebrating its 200-year anniversary. So it was established in 1820. We have had a long history of astronomy since then, with many contributions. Going into the future though, astronomy in South Africa is booming. We have SALT, the fourth largest optical telescope in the world. Meerkat has just come online, and in the future we'll be getting the square kilometre array. At the observatory we have a very active outreach department where we engage a lot with learners and educators. So we run teacher training programs to teach the teachers about astronomy, and which they can then pass on to their learners. We also have a lot of school visits where we take telescopes and various materials out to schools around the country. We also host school groups. Weekly school groups are coming through our observatory. We run small workshops with them, build small telescopes and teach them about the stars. So SALT is the Southern African Large Telescope, of which the SAAO, the South African Astronomical Observatory here, is a large partner. It is a very large optical telescope. Meerkat is recently opened, it opened in May this year, radio telescope. So the most powerful radio telescope of its kind. It's a South African project with 64 radio dishes, 15 meters in diameter, up in Carnarvon in the Northern Cape. As you know, the Royal Astronomical Society shares a birth year with our observatory here, so we're both celebrating our bicentenaries in 2020. As part of that, we've been honoured to receive funding from the Royal Astronomical Society to put together a data exhibit. And what this exhibit aims to achieve is to talk about the data that is across the last 2 centuries. So moving from the original notebooks, how astronomers recorded the stars, drew sketches, to the current big data regime we find ourselves in. So the exhibit we're putting together along with the RAS and IDEA is hoping to walk people through the development of data in astronomy over the last 200 years, and then give them a glimpse of what will be coming in the future.